I stood there dripping wet in my father's marble foyer, my designer dress clinging to my skin, mascara probably running down my face. My father, Robert King, one of the most powerful business tycoons in the state, looked at me with concern that quickly turned to cold fury. "Anna, where's the Mercedes I gave you for your birthday? Don't tell me it broke down in this storm." Before I could even open my mouth, my sister-in-law, Sadie, cut in with the most arrogant smirk I'd ever seen plastered across her face. "Oh, I handled that situation, Mr. King. I gave the car to my mother. She needed something befitting her status, and honestly, Anna doesn't need to be driving around in luxury vehicles. It sends the wrong message. She can take Ubers like normal people." The entire dining room went silent. My husband can too. Sitting there with a piece of steak halfway to his mouth, just nodded slowly like his sister had said something perfectly reasonable. My father's face didn't change, but I saw his hand tighten around his wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. He said nothing for a moment. Then, under the table, I saw him pull out his phone and type a single message. What he did next filled me with a pride so deep I'll never forget it for the rest of my life, because within the next 2 hours, my father didn't just teach them a lesson, he destroyed their entire world, and they never saw it coming. But before we continue with this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. And let me know in the comments, what time is it where you're watching from, and what country are you in? I love seeing our global audience. Now let's get back to the revenge. While my father was calmly finishing his dinner and I was still processing the shock of what Sadie had just done, Helen was living her absolute best life across town at the Riverside Country Club. She pulled up in my Mercedes, the one my father had custom ordered for my birthday with my initials engraved on the dashboard, and stepped out like she was walking a red carpet. She had on this ridiculous amount of jewelry, a fur stole despite it being barely autumn, and heels so high I'm surprised she could walk. Her friends surrounded the car immediately, running their hands along the hood, peering inside at the cream leather interior. Helen was eating up every second of the attention. "Cantu finally came through," she announced, loud enough for half the parking lot to hear. $150,000 paid in cash. He said I deserved to ride in style after everything I've done for him and that wife of his. That wife. That's what she called me. Like I was some burden Cantu had taken on out of charity, not the woman whose money had been funding their lifestyle for 3 years. Her friend Margaret took about a dozen photos of Helen posing with the car, and within minutes, Helen was posting them all over social media. She tagged the Mercedes dealership, added hashtags about luxury living and blessed motherhood, and captioned it with, "When your son knows your worth." The comments poured in immediately. Heart emojis, congratulations, people saying Cantu was such a good son. Helen scrolled through them all with this satisfied smile, soaking in praise for a gift she had absolutely no right to. "I'm heading to the Galleria," she told her friends, checking her lipstick in the car's mirror. "Need to break her in properly with a real shopping trip." At the mall, she handed the keys to the valet with this exaggerated flourish, pressing a $50 bill into his hand like she was some kind of celebrity. The valet nodded politely, but I later found out he thought she was showing off way too hard. Helen disappeared into the mall with her credit cards ready, completely oblivious to the fact that her phone kept lighting up in her purse with a notification she never bothered to check. A security alert from the car's system, a message that would have warned her what was coming. But Helen was too busy playing queen to notice that her throne was about to collapse. Helen came back to the valet stand 2 hours later, arms loaded with shopping bags from every high-end store in the Galleria. She was practically glowing, already planning her next post about her shopping haul. The valet brought the Mercedes around and she tipped him again, making sure people nearby saw her generosity. She loaded her bags into the back seat, settled into the driver's seat, and turned the key. The alarm that went off was so loud, I heard people describe it as physically painful. Every light on the car started flashing in a pattern that looked like a police seizure. The engine died instantly, and every single door locked with Helen trapped inside. The dashboard screen lit up bright red with words that made my heart sing when I heard about it later. Unauthorized operator. Asset recovery protocol activated. Helen started screaming immediately, pounding on the windows, yanking at the door handles. Nothing worked. The car had essentially become a glass cage in the middle of the busiest parking lot in the city on a Saturday evening. People stopped walking. Phones came out. Within seconds, dozens of people were recording her, some even laughing as Helen's perfectly applied makeup started running down her face in black streaks. She kept screaming that it was her car, that her son bought it for her, that someone needed to help her. But the more she yelled, the more people recorded. Someone posted it to social media in real time, and it started getting shared immediately. 15 minutes passed. 15 minutes of Helen trapped in that car, crying and humiliated, while a crowd of at least 50 people watched. I wasn't there, but my father made sure I saw the videos later. He wanted me to see justice being served. Then a King Enterprises tow truck pulled up, the company logo unmistakable on the side. 2 security agents in corporate uniforms approached the car with a tablet and some kind of override device. They unlocked the doors remotely and Helen practically fell out, her hair a mess, mascara everywhere, still screaming about theft and lawyers. The lead security agent looked at her with zero emotion and said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "This vehicle was illegally transferred. You have no ownership rights, ma'am. The car is being recovered by its legal owner." Helen's friends from the country club were standing right there in the crowd. Margaret had her phone out, recording everything. The same women who'd been complimenting Helen hours earlier were now whispering to each other, their faces full of secondhand embarrassment and barely concealed delight at watching someone fall so hard. The car was loaded onto the truck with a sign facing outward, "Stolen Property Recovery." Helen stood there in the parking lot, alone, surrounded by shopping bags she could barely afford, watching her moment of glory get towed away. Cantu's phone started ringing right as my father was cutting into his second piece of prime rib. The sound shattered the tense silence that had fallen over the table after Sadie's smug announcement. Cantu looked at the screen, and his face went pale. He answered it, and immediately Helen's hysterical screaming poured through the speaker loud enough for everyone to hear. "They stole my car. Your wife had me arrested. I'm standing in a parking lot like some criminal, and everyone recorded it. Do something." Cantu jumped up from his chair so fast it fell backward. He turned on me with a fury I'd never seen before, his face twisted with rage. "What did you do? You humiliated my mother in public. How could you be so vindictive?" Sadie stood up next to him, pointing her finger at me. "This is exactly why we should have never trusted you with nice things. You're petty and cruel." I just sat there, too shocked to even defend myself. My father had done this, not me, but they didn't care about the truth. They just wanted someone to blame. My father stood up slowly. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees just from the look on his face. "Cantu?" my father said in a voice so calm it was terrifying. "You've just demonstrated gross misconduct and complicity in asset misappropriation in front of witnesses." Cantu blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "You allowed your sister to illegally transfer property that belonged to my daughter. You endorsed it publicly. And now you're verbally abusing your wife for the consequences of your family's theft." My father pulled out his phone and made a call. "Remove Cantu King from all employee databases. Termination effective immediately. Code of conduct violation." The blood drained from Cantu's face. "You can't fire me, I'm your VP of operations." "I just did. Your position has been eliminated due to ethical violations." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway like they'd been waiting. My father held out his hand. "Company car keys. Now." Cantu's hands shook as he dug the keys from his pocket. My father took them and reached into his wallet, pulling out a $50 bill. "For an Uber, since you believe Anna should be content with that budget." Sadie grabbed Cantu's arm. "You can't let him do this!" "Escort them off the property," my father said to security. As they were being walked out, my father's lawyer, John, appeared beside me with a leather folder. "Divorce papers are ready when you are, Anna," he said quietly. My father looked at Cantu one last time before he disappeared through the door. You threw away a diamond because your sister told you it was just glass. That's a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. The rain started the moment security closed the gate behind Cantu and Sadie. Not a light drizzle, but a full downpour that soaked them within seconds. Cantu pulled out his phone to call an Uber, his hands still shaking from being escorted out like a criminal. He tapped the app and waited. Then a message appeared on his screen. Your account has been restricted from operating in this area. He tried again. Same message. My father's gated community had its own security protocols, and somehow Cantu's access had been revoked from everything, even ride-sharing apps. We have to walk, he said, staring at his phone in disbelief. Walk? Sadie shrieked. It's 1.5 miles to your apartment. Then start walking. They made it maybe 3 minutes before Sadie started in on him. You're supposed to be the man. You should have stood up to him. You just sat there and let him fire you like you were nothing. Cantu stopped walking and turned on her, water streaming down his face. Your effrontery caused this. You had no right to give away Anna's property. You don't just take someone's car and hand it to your mother like it's yours to give. Oh, so now you care about Anna. Where was this loyalty when I suggested it? You nodded, you agreed. Because you always do this. You push and push until everyone goes along with your schemes, and then when it falls apart, you blame everyone else. They kept walking, both soaked through, dress shoes filling with water, designer clothes clinging to their skin. Sadie's hair hung in wet strings, and her makeup was running just like Helen's had in that parking lot. When they finally reached Cantu's apartment building, shivering and miserable, they heard an engine behind them. A brand new black SUV glided past, smooth and silent, water spraying elegantly from its tires. I was driving. My father had given me his personal car for the night, wanted me to feel the power shift immediately. My friend Joanna sat in the passenger seat and said something that made me laugh. I remember exactly what it was. She'd made a joke about karma having excellent timing, and the laugh felt so good, so freeing. I looked straight ahead as we passed them. Didn't even glance in their direction. They were standing there dripping wet, looking like drowned rats, and I drove by like they didn't exist. Because at that moment, they didn't. Not anymore. Cantu watched the SUV disappear around the corner, and something in his face broke. Not anger anymore, just the slow, creeping realization of what he'd lost. Sadie saw it too and grabbed his arm. Don't you dare feel sorry for yourself. We're the victims here. But even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Cantu and Sadie were still peeling off their wet clothes when someone started pounding on the apartment door. Helen burst in, equally soaked, her hair plastered to her head, still wearing the expensive outfit from the country club that was now completely ruined. "This is your fault," she screamed at Cantu before the door even closed. "You were supposed to protect me. Your father-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone I know. Margaret recorded the whole thing and it's already online." "My fault?" Cantu shot back. "Sadie's the one who gave away Anna's car like she had any right to." Sadie whirled on both of them. "Don't you dare pin this on me. Anna's being vindictive because she's always been jealous of our family. This is her doing." They went in circles like that, voices getting louder. Blame getting thrown around while all three of them dripped water onto Cantu's cheap carpet. Nobody was listening. Everyone was just trying to yell over each other. Cantu's stomach growled and he realized none of them had actually eaten. He grabbed his phone and opened a delivery app. "I'm ordering food. I can't deal with this on an empty stomach." He added items to the cart, went to checkout and entered his credit card. Declined. He tried another card. Declined. A third card. Declined. His hands started shaking. He opened his banking app and started checking the cards one by one. Every single credit card he had was listed as supplementary on Anna's primary account. Every single one. "We can't order food," he said quietly. Helen stopped mid-rant. "What?" "All the cards are on Anna's account." She canceled them. He checked his actual bank account, the one with his salary deposits, $847, 2 weeks until his next paycheck from a job he no longer had. Sadie snatched the phone from him. "That can't be right? Check again?" That's when the lights went out. The apartment went completely dark and the heater stopped humming. The refrigerator stopped running. The prepaid electricity meter had run out and nobody had noticed it needed refilling because Anna always took care of it. They stood there in the pitch black, the only light coming from their phone screens. Helen's voice came out of the darkness, broken and small. "What have we done?" The reality crashed down on Cantu all at once. No job, no income, no credit, no savings because every luxury they'd lived with had been funded by Anna's money. The nice apartment, the restaurants, Helen's country club membership, Sadie's car lease, all of it had been flowing from Anna's accounts while he played the role of successful VP. They'd been living her life while treating her like she should be grateful just to be included. And now, sitting in the cold darkness, Cantu finally understood. There was no way back from this. Monday morning, Cantu put on his best suit and showed up at King Enterprises at 7:30 sharp. He'd convinced himself over the weekend that my father had just been angry, that cooler heads would prevail, that his work record would speak for itself. His keycard didn't work at the front entrance. He tried it 3 times before security approached him with a cardboard box. "Mr. King, your personal items," the guard said, not meeting his eyes. Inside the box was his desk photo, his coffee mug, some pens, and a folder. Cantu opened the folder right there in the lobby, and an HR representative appeared like she'd been waiting. "Termination cause is listed as ethical violations and asset misappropriation," she recited in a flat, professional tone. "Your final paycheck will be directly deposited according to state law. Your benefits end at midnight tonight. Building access has been permanently revoked." "I need to speak to Robert," Cantu said, his voice cracking. "Mr. King is not available to former employees." Cantu spent that entire week sending out applications. His resume was impressive. 5 years as VP of Operations at a major enterprise, excellent performance reviews, and significant project completions. He should have had recruiters calling within hours. Instead, he got interviews scheduled and then mysteriously canceled. The few that did happen ended within 10 minutes. One interviewer actually closed his laptop mid-conversation when Cantu mentioned King Enterprises, made an excuse about a scheduling conflict, and walked out. On Friday, Cantu met with a smaller firm, desperate enough to be honest. "Look," the hiring manager said, leaning back in his chair. "You seem qualified, but Mr. King's recommendation carries weight in this industry. Nobody's going to touch you. Not in this city, probably not in this state." Cantu checked his LinkedIn that night. His profile views had dropped from 30 or 40 a day to 0. Messages from professional contacts went unanswered. His network had evaporated overnight because nobody wanted to be associated with someone Robert King had personally blacklisted. He applied for mid-level positions, then entry-level, then anything in the industry at all. Every door was closed. By the second week, Helen's house payment was late, and Sadie's car got repossessed. Cantu's apartment rent was due, and he had $400 left. He took a job at a warehouse loading trucks for minimum wage. The supervisor who hired him looked at his resume and laughed. "VP of Operations? How'd you end up here?" Cantu didn't answer. He just put on the safety vest and started lifting boxes, feeling every ounce of his former life crumble with each load he carried. His hands blistered by the end of the first day. His back ached, and he knew this was just the beginning of how far he was going to fall. 3 months later, I filed for divorce. John represented me, the same corporate lawyer who'd handed me those papers at my father's dinner table. Cantu showed up to court with Helen and Sadie, all 3 of them wearing their best remaining clothes, looking like they'd practiced their testimony for weeks. They had. Because Cantu didn't just respond to the divorce petition, he countersued for $2 million in asset division. Helen took the stand first, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "I raised a good husband for Anna. I taught him values, responsibility, how to treat a wife properly. I'm entitled to compensation for the years of investment I put into their marriage." The judge's eyebrow went up, but he let her continue. Sadie went next, sitting up straight like she was testifying at a corporate hearing. "Anna owes this family. We supported her, included her, treated her like one of us. She's being vindictive and cruel because she can't handle that we have standards." I sat there listening to them rewrite history, claiming they'd supported me when I'd been funding their entire lifestyle. John didn't even look concerned. He just waited patiently for his turn. When it came, he stood up with a leather folder and addressed the judge directly. Your Honor, 3 weeks ago, Mr. Robert King ordered a forensic financial audit of all accounts connected to this marriage. With your permission, I'd like to enter it into evidence. The judge nodded, and John handed him a document that had to be 50 pages thick. Over the past 3 years, the defendants charged $312,847 to supplementary credit cards on Mrs. and Bendy Anna King's primary account. Helen's face went white. Sadie grabbed Cantu's arm. John continued, pulling up slides on the courtroom screen. $26,000 in luxury vacations for Mrs. Helen King, $41,000 for Mrs. Sadie King's car lease, insurance, and maintenance, $73,000 in designer clothing and jewelry, $38,000 in spa memberships and cosmetic procedures, $18,000 in country club fees for Mrs. Helen King alone. The list went on and on. Every charge, every purchase, every luxury they'd enjoyed while telling me I should be content taking an Uber. The judge's expression grew darker with every page he turned. Your Honor, John said quietly, this is financial abuse. They treated Mrs. King as an ATM while demanding she live in poverty. The judge looked up at Cantu, at Helen, at Sadie. His voice was ice cold. The countersuit is dismissed with prejudice. I'm granting the divorce and awarding Mrs. King all marital assets. Furthermore, I'm ordering the seizure of the only titled asset in the defendants' names to compensate for the debt owed. Helen shot to her feet. What asset? We don't have anything. Your house, Mrs. King. It will be seized and sold to pay the debt you incurred. Helen let out a scream that echoed through the courtroom and then collapsed. Sadie tried to catch her, but they both ended up on the floor. Cantu just sat there, frozen, staring at nothing. The judge looked at all of them with something close to disgust. The audacity is breathtaking. You treated your wife as an ATM while demanding she live in poverty. Court is adjourned. 5 years passed and they fell further than any of them thought possible. The 3 of them ended up sharing a studio apartment in the worst part of the city, the kind of place where the walls grew mold and the heat barely worked in winter. Helen slept on a mattress on the floor, Sadie took the couch, and Cantu had a sleeping bag in the corner. Helen worked as a washerwoman at a commercial laundry facility, her hands so calloused and cracked they bled sometimes. The same hands that used to be manicured every week at a spa I'd paid for were now permanently stained and rough. Cantu worked double shifts loading produce at a market, his back permanently hunched from the heavy lifting, looking 20 years older than he actually was. The man who used to wear tailored suits to executive meetings now came home smelling like rotten vegetables and sweat. Sadie worked the fryer at a fast food place, her face aged by stress and grease burns, her hair thin from the constant heat and cheap diet. They hated each other now. The alliance that had once united them against me had turned into a toxic prison they couldn't escape. I should have never told you that car was a good idea. Sadie, Helen said one night, folding laundry on the floor. You always had to push things too far. Cantu should have been man enough to protect us from Robert. Sadie shot back from the couch, but he just sat there like a coward. You both destroyed my life with your greed, Cantu muttered from his corner, not even looking at them. I had everything, and you convinced me it wasn't enough. They'd been having the same argument for 5 years, each blaming the others, none of them taking responsibility for what they'd done. The small television in the corner had broken sound, but they kept it on anyway, because silence was somehow worse than the constant reminder of what they'd lost. That night, a news segment came on. The closed captions appeared at the bottom of the screen. Local entrepreneur Anna King opens third tech consulting office. All 3 of them stopped what they were doing and stared at the screen. There I was, radiant and confident in a tailored dress, cutting a ribbon in front of a modern glass building. My father stood beside me, proud. My new husband Latshaw held our daughter, both of them beaming. The camera showed the inside of my company headquarters, showed my team of employees, showed the success I'd built entirely on my own merit after leaving them all behind. Helen started crying silently. Sadie turned away. Cantu just stared at the screen, his face hollow. They sat there in that moldy apartment, surrounded by the consequences of their choices, watching me live the life they'd tried to steal. And there was nothing any of them could do but sit in the darkness and regret. Last month I took my family to dinner at Marcello's, this beautiful 5-star Italian place downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street. Latshaw was making our daughter giggle by doing terrible impressions of her kindergarten teacher, and I was laughing so hard my sides hurt. That's when I saw him through the window. Cantu stood on the sidewalk in clothes that had seen better years, holding car keys for the illegal valet operation that worked the restaurant strip. He was thin, his face hollow, his posture bent like he was carrying weight that never went away. Next to him, Helen sat on her knees on the pavement, selling individual tissue packets to people walking by. Her hair was gray and thin, her face lined with years of hard living. Across the street, Sadie held a cardboard sign, though I couldn't read what it said from this distance. Cantu looked up, maybe feeling eyes on him, and saw me through the window. Our eyes met. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just complete indifference, like looking at a stranger whose name you can't quite remember. His face, though, his face flooded with everything. Shame, regret, recognition of exactly what he'd thrown away. He saw Latshaw kiss my cheek, saw our daughter in her beautiful dress, saw the life he could have had if he'd just valued what he had, instead of listening to people who only wanted to take. I turned calmly to the waiter passing our table. "Excuse me, could you close the blinds? The sunset's a bit bright." "Of course, ma'am." The blind descended slowly, severing the eye contact, closing him out of my view and out of my life. I turned back to Latshaw and picked up our conversation like nothing had happened, because to me, nothing had. Outside, Cantu watched that blind come down, and something in him finally broke completely. He realized in that moment that he'd been erased from my story. I'd moved on so completely that seeing him was just a minor inconvenience, like a glare from the sun. He started walking as rain began to fall, just like that night 5 years ago when everything collapsed. He passed a coffee shop with a TV in the window showing my interview from last week. The closed captions read, "Success isn't about wealth, it's about surrounding yourself with people who value you." Cantu kept walking into the darkness, the rain soaking through his jacket, knowing he'd spend the rest of his life watching from the outside while I lived the life he'd destroyed. And somewhere behind him, Helen and Sadie were having the same argument they'd been having for 5 years, blaming each other for the choices that led them here. Karma didn't need to be loud or dramatic, it just needed to be permanent. So here's my question for you. Do you think Cantu, Helen, and Sadie got what they deserved, or did my father go too far? And be honest, if you were in my position, would you have felt satisfied seeing them like that? Or would you have felt something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know what you think. And if this story hit you the way it hit me when I lived it, make sure you're subscribed because I've got more stories that prove karma always collects its debts. Always.